The Supermarine Scimitar flies out for the Royal Navy in War Thunder. Let's check out this interesting aircraft and see what it can do. The Supermarine Scimitar was the result of a development process that went through several rounds of changing requirements, redesigns, and even a period where they thought it was going to operate without landing gear from inflatable decked aircraft carriers. Well, obviously that was a bad idea, and a few redesigns later, the aircraft matured into the Scimitar F1. The earliest prototypes of the initial designs started flying in 1951, but really they looked nothing like the final product. If you can believe it, the first prototypes had straight wings and a V-tail. The development ended up being significantly delayed due to all the redesign work and changing requirements, delayed so badly that the first production aircraft didn't fly until 1957, by which point it was no longer considered state-of-the-art. Many of the proposed design features were dropped along the way, such as a tail-mounted radar set, and the resulting aircraft ended up being entirely conventional. When it was introduced, the Scimitar was the heaviest aircraft to fly for the Royal Navy, and there were actually problems operating it from the UK's somewhat small-sized aircraft carriers. It gained a reputation in service as an accident-prone aircraft and was very difficult to fly. In fact, almost half of the entire production run were lost due to accidents and malfunctions. Its performance ended up being unimpressive, and the Royal Navy never really had a good role for it. They already had a capable fighter, interceptor, and the Scimitar's suitability for ground attack or anti-shipping strikes was limited at best, and it was replaced in that role by the Buccaneer after just a couple of years. The Scimitar was only in frontline combat service for a very brief period, before it was refitted to operate as a carrier-based tanker aircraft for the rest of its tenure. The Scimitar is generally considered as a flop by aviation historians, and it was the last aircraft built by Supermarine before being absorbed into the British Aircraft Corporation. What we have in War Thunder is the Scimitar F1, a naval jet fighter at BR 8.7. The plane has a radar gun sight but no ballistics computer. Its weapon loadouts are limited to 4 pylons, but the selections are adequate considering where this plane is in the tech tree and everything. Your air-to-air missile is the basic AIM-9B, which is an entry-level weapon and may end up being your primary source of kills, but more on that later. The Scimitar also gets the AGM-12 bullpup air-to-surface missile, which gives it some ground attack capability combined with its 1,000-pound bombs, unguided rockets, and 4 heavy cannon. The 30mm Aiden cannons hit exceptionally hard, and if you can land shells, they're powerful enough to take out pillboxes and medium tanks if you angle in from above. The unguided rockets are, frankly, too inaccurate to be any real use in air battles, but if you fly out for close air support and ground RB, a salvo of them might be able to take out a tank or two. Overall, its potential for ground attack is seriously limited by the quantity of weapons, even if the weapons it gets can be reasonably effective individually. The flight performance of the Scimitar is a bit of a mixed bag. The plane has a reputation for being fast, and it is. The acceleration is quite good, and the climb performance is outstanding for a plane at this BR without any afterburners. It's limited to subsonic speeds, but among subsonic aircraft in War Thunder, this is absolutely one of the fastest. You've got the engine power to catch or outrun basically any other subsonic plane, even if it takes a little time. Unfortunately, that's where the good news ends. There are 2 major problems with the Scimitar. First, it doesn't turn well. Its sustained rate of turn is poor, and it doesn't snap into high-G maneuvers as well as comparable aircraft. Close-in dogfights can be a serious challenge, and you'll often get stuck with something like a MiG-17 on your tail, with no possible way to shake them unless the other pilot makes a mistake. Now, I know, anytime I do a review of a plane and I mention that it struggles in dogfights or something, or I otherwise give it some unflattering commentary, there are always a few people who jump into the comments to brag about how they go ace every time they fly the plane out, and they're able to make it perform like a UFO. If that's you, and it's true, congratulations, you're a unicorn. An average player isn't going to have that experience, and will struggle in close-in fights flying the Scimitar. The second problem, and in my opinion the bigger problem, is the rudder. The Scimitar has a very sloppy rudder, which doesn't respond well, and feels like it lags a full 2 seconds behind your inputs. Worse, when it eventually responds, it under-responds, so you don't get what you're expecting out of it. I can say without any exaggeration that the Scimitar has the worst rudder of any fighter or attacker that I've played in the game so far. This makes coordinated turns incredibly difficult if you're flying in VR, and it makes accurate gunnery a serious challenge. I found when flying this plane that I'd often find myself in a situation where I'm closing in on someone, again, the engines deliver, and I'm lined up for a solid kill shot, but even mild jinks are enough to throw your aim off because the rudder just won't respond, and it leaves you 2 or 3 degrees off of the horizontal angle you need. By the time that the rudder corrects, it's too late and you've missed, and either overshot the target, or now you're stuck in a turn fight that you're probably going to lose. Because of all this, your guns end up being the most useful in angles where you can aim them by pulling completely vertical with no horizontal corrections, which is a rare situation. And of course, in head-on passes, they still hit amazing. This means that quite often, your sidewinders are going to be your primary weapon. The good news is that you get 4 of them. The bad news is that the AIM-9B is easy to dodge, and a lot of your shots are probably going to miss. Flying the Scimitar out in missions isn't as bad as you might think, though, based on its lackluster performance at turn fighting. At least, it doesn't have to be. I had a fair amount of success using the Scimitar to side climb and either intercept bombers, which are still a thing at this BR, or to make high-speed boom and zoom type attacks on targets below. I'm not showing much of that here, though, because, to be really blunt, high-altitude mission profiles like that involve a lot of downtime and just flying in a straight line at nothing, and only a few seconds of action, so it's not very interesting to watch. Success in missions is 50% luck and 50% playing to your strengths. And since the Scimitar's biggest strength is its engine power and climb rate, use those, and you'll do much better than if you try and charge into low-level dogfights. You can, of course, load up the Scimitar with air-to-ground weapons and try to fly it out as a high-speed bomb truck, or use the bullpups. That can work, and it's fast enough to avoid interception most of the time if you're careful, but the catch is, because the payload is so light in terms of quantity, you won't get as many points as you could by engaging air targets. I'm generally not one of those players who makes fun of people for using fighters as ground attackers, but in this case, I really don't recommend it. Maybe if the Scimitar had a ballistics computer, but it doesn't. Visually, the Scimitar, well, I don't know if you see it, but I think it kind of looks like a stretched out Harrier with conventional engine exhaust and a lower mounted wing, but that's just me. You don't get any custom paint jobs or anything, and it's not an ugly aircraft by any stretch, and the default skin looks okay. Landing the Scimitar is pleasantly simple. Its air brakes help drop speed effectively, and its landing gear is quite strong, so you don't need to be gentle on the runway when you're touching down. The only downside is you don't have a braking chute, since it's a naval jet with an arrestor hook, so your overall landing run might be a little long. The cockpit is surprisingly good. I liked flying this one out in VR, even if the performance was a challenge. The instruments are laid out very well, and you have great visibility. No complaints at all. To close up on the Supermarine Scimitar F1, this plane has very strong engine performance for its BR, with solid top-end speed and a rate of climb that's exceptionally good for a subsonic fighter. Also, it can carry 4 sidewinders, and its guns hit like a truck. However, The rudder is beyond useless, to the point where it's a major problem and can handicap your ability to hit with those nasty cannons. Also, the plane can't turn very well in dogfights. It's expensive to repair, and its air-to-ground potential is limited. The final verdict on the Supermarine Scimitar is that this is a tricky plane to fly and use effectively. If you decide you're going to try and get good with it, you're in for a challenge, and average players will have a very difficult time with this one. As always, thanks for watching.